So Steve Smith, he did a great breakdown
for the offense.
He did a great breakdown of Travis Hunter, and I haven't really done that many breakdowns or shown that many breakdowns of Travis Hunter as a receiver. But I think it's key because a lot of people think that because Andrew Berry was talking more about Travis Hunter this week when he had his long press conference, about 30 minutes long, people think that that leans to us drafting Travis Hunter and us using him as a receiver. So let's get to Steve Smith's breakdown, and we got it here. So let's go. Fair use for all the videos I use.
What is his responsibility? And then defense. What is his responsibility if they get in this formation and do this?
I'm exhausted and we're just talking about it.
Bro, I'm tired already talking. I need a drink. I need to drink me some caffeine. Like, I want to see that boy caffeine intake.
Unbelievable. It's unreal. So now listen, let's focus on the receiver side of things because there's a lot of buzz out there about the Browns maybe picking Travis Hunter at second overall. I will say this, talking to people in that organization, Steve, Andrew Berry has played it very close to the vest. He is not telling a lot of people in the building what he's thinking, where he wants to go with this pick. Obviously, they're looking at quarterbacks, they're looking at Abdul Carter, they're looking, you know what I mean? And so a lot of things are connected to the Browns. The reason I bring that.
That's the key. I normally don't like to kind of keep cutting in and out of, but this is something I definitely want to say. He's talked to people in the building and he's talked to people around the league, and Andrew Berry is keeping it very close to the chest on what he's actually going to do. Last week, we talked about when John Dorsey was making his picks, and he said that basically he told ownership a week before, ownership and the coach, that they were drafting Baker Mayfield a week before, and then the team and all the staff didn't find out until an hour before the draft actually started. So this is around the time where Andrew Berry's probably made the decision already of what they're going to do with the number 2 overall pick, but we just won't know, and that's perfectly fine. But I think this is key where you have the reporting. The reporting is saying, hey, we have no idea what the Browns are going to do. So I think that's very key because a lot of people just have it, locked in that we're going to take Travis Hunter, and I'm not one of those people who believes that. So let's get to it now. I'm going to stop running my mouth. I'm going to let this thing play off, and they're going to break it down.
That up with them at 2 is they see him primarily as a wide receiver. I know the Browns have kicked around the idea of taking Travis Hunter at 2, and then they're picking again at the top of the second, or they trade back into the back end of the first and get one of these other quarterbacks. Say it's Jackson Dart, say it's Quinn Ewers, say it's Tyler Shough, who's getting a lot of love from a lot of quarterback evaluators, even though he's 39 years old or something, entering the NFL after 42 years of college.
Should be balling at 50.
But they've tossed that idea around, right? Where it's you get Travis, the unicorn of a talent, then we get the quarterback with the next pick. Anyways, the reason I brought them up is they're looking at him as a receiver. So let's look at him as.
So hold on.
Okay.
Now you're saying that when you look at the Browns defense, I don't think there's any room for him to play in the secondary.
They got good secondary.
They got a great secondary. Good. I'm not sure I necessarily see, how or who does Travis beat out at the starting corner position, because both of those guys have played really, really well. Now, when you're the second overall pick, you all of a sudden things get, interesting, unique.
Yeah, but all right, let's just say it that way then. Like, there are people in the league that say, okay, say he winds up in Cleveland, you are a full-time wide receiver and a part-time corner. I know that's hard to say because the league has only seen it the other way. Coaches, evaluators, Steve, what happens to their brains when they don't have a comp for something? They explode. They need comps for everything, right? They love comps. And so could this be something that Cleveland does? I'm not saying it's exactly what happens, but we're speculating because we're talking about him as a wide receiver here. Plays full-time receiver. What are we getting, I guess, skill set wise that's already there before we talk about stuff that you'd like to see him gain in the next level? Is it the ball skills that are already there? Is it
ball skills are already there?
Right?
So his superpower is his ability to track the football, right? I think that makes him such an elite corner. There are corners who have a hard time tracking the football. There are a ton of corners who have a hard time catching the football. Wide receivers joke all the time, coaches joke all the time. A failed wide receiver is a corner. And Travis Hunter is not a failed wide receiver. His ability to track the football, whether it's a pick or catching the football out in a route as a wide receiver, is pretty tier 1 level.
Yeah. There's people I've talked to, Steve, that say he has the best, whether it's contested, contact catches, ability in that sense. He's the best in the draft at catching the football.
He runs some good routes, but he's not a finished product. He needs to work on some of those routes a little bit. Some of them he runs really good, right? They were running some whip routes, but then there's other routes where you can tell he needs a little bit more work. And some of that has to do with the offense that they were in as well. They were not in an offense that at times had a lot of variations for him in the route game. So that's not necessarily his fault. You don't get to pick and choose how your coaches utilize you. You just try to make the best of what they're doing.
Yeah. Speaking of routes, before we get into the film of Travis Hunter, it was funny. I mean, this was broadcast on NFL Network. You and I were standing right there. I got word that he was not going to run routes as late as Thursday night, and then Friday morning rolls around. He is going to run. We saw them kind of figuring out what he's going to run in the morning, and I get a text from a receiver coach who's watching it on TV going, what are these routes? These routes are not in a playbook. Like, nope. But also, he said, I understand why they're doing it. This is to showcase how twitchy he is, how he moves, unlike anybody else in the draft. A lot of it was, right, Steve, at the line of scrimmage. I think you could say wasted movement, but it was a lot to showcase how he moves.
Yeah.
And option stuff, showcase how he moves, and that's the way some of the showcase went. That's not what he's going to run in the NFL.
No, he's going to get and here's the thing. I'm not going to show it on there, but he tried one of those moves against Colorado State, number 7. The ball went to Jimmy Horn Jr. And Travis got jammed up a little bit. So
happens.
But yeah, no one's excluded for getting jammed up. It happens. Yeah. I thought it was okay. People were like, oh man, he was out there with no gloves. Knowing the circumstances, I think he forgot them. He wasn't out there on purpose without no gloves. I would just call him out. Travis forgot his gloves.
We did do a hand comparison between reps. Remember that? He came over to you and I?
He was coming to Raz and just mess with him. He was like, that's why I want to, he's like, that's why I'm coming over here, because he was like, you don't care. Like, I was just having a good time and taking in the atmosphere. And so I looked and I said, you got little hands. And so he kind of looks at me, and everybody's taller than me. What they do, right? And then he looks at me, and goes, oh, he was gonna say you have low hands too, and he goes, oh wow, you have big hands. And so we did a little hand thing right there. He was like, oh.
Before we get into the film, though, also remember, you can always interact with us. Comments, whatever, interact with each other, argue, banter, whatever you choose.
Yep.
Travis Hunter, DB, receiver. Everybody wanted Steve's opinion. What's yours?
Give us your essay. We love to read your essay on what you believe Travis Hunter is or is not. But also remember, you ain't Travis Hunter.
This episode of 89 is brought to you by Better.
All right, so just seeing that there, like, I think this just was a great breakdown. I mean, we have all these draft pundits and analysts, and they get up on TV and they talk about like, this prospect is good at this prospect is good as that. One thing they don't really take into consideration is the rooms that these players are going to be going into. It's the same thing I said. Like, DB is not an area, a high area of need for the Browns. The Browns I hope the Browns add a safety in this draft at some point, but cornerback is definitely not a high area of need. I would say they need to get a receiver earlier in this draft as well. But if you just look at it, how could you be a Browns fan and be okay with, say, because we picked him number 2 overall, now Travis Hunter is going to be starting over Denzel Ward? Nobody's going to be okay with that. Martin Emerson had a rough year last year. He got tried a lot more last year. But after his rookie campaign, would people just be okay with Martin Emerson going to, a backup position and not being a starter on the other side of the field, opposite of Denzel Ward? And we just say, hey, we took Travis, so we got to put him up there. So this is that other side of it, where to make these decisions, you have to go through, all of the steps of what is actually happening in real time. So no one has asked that next step question, that next level question. He wants to play both ways. That's perfectly fine. I don't have a problem with him going forward, him trying to play both ways as much as he can. I don't have a problem with that. I think the only way you get innovation is by people trying to do things. So I don't have a problem with him, working and trying to play both ways. I'm fine with that. But I think that if he's going to a cornerback room with cornerbacks that we say him as a rookie, they are better than him, how can we just move them out the way for him because of where we drafted him and because that this is what he wants to do? That's where I see we would kind of run into an issue where then you can say, okay, well, maybe, if we had him as a nickel cornerback, but then he'd be in the slot a lot. And it's an adjustment being a slot corner versus being an outside corner. Look at Greg Newsome. Greg Newsome, he's kind of stated he prefers to be on the outside versus in the slot. And it was rough at times for him with that adjustment. And so we just look at, like, man, he's just such a talent. Oh, he can just move into the slot. It'll be no problem, even though it's not something he's done before. So in those situations, I think you got to ask that next level question. And once you go to that next level question, then you say, okay, I don't know if I see them going this way. So let's do that next level question. We already done this with Travis. Let's do the next level question with Shedeur. So Shedeur, high completion percentage. Everybody says he's pinpoint accurate. He can drop the ball in the shoebox. We've seen the passes. Even if his full upside is Kirk Cousins, would he be worth the number 2 overall pick to the Browns who don't have a quarterback? I would say people have already answered that question. You want to know how they answered that question? Prior to the Browns getting Joe Flacco, People wanted us to go after Kirk Cousins, and they wanted us to even trade draft capital for Kirk Cousins once Kirk Cousins wasn't released from the Atlanta Falcons. So once you ask that next level question, people have already answered their question. So if you want to get an old version of what you think this quarterback's ceiling could be, you would always take the younger, cheaper version, because it's also been reported that Kirk Cousins, he wants to add additional money to his contract, and he has a no trade clause, so he's determining where he goes. So he can right the ship of, he can pick and choose. So if we're going to give up all of that for Kirk Cousins, the older version, why wouldn't you take the younger version on a rookie contract? You already answered the question. Now let's look at Abdul Carter. I kind of never saw the Browns taking Abdul Carter, but let's answer that next level question with Abdul Carter. The Browns, let me not lie, I think the Browns scored 15 points last year, 15 points a game. So the Browns, as a team, 15.2 points a game that we scored. We also gave up 25 points a game. We only scored 29 touchdowns. We gave up 50 touchdowns. Surprisingly, we had just as many first downs as our opponents. Third down efficiency was 29%, almost 55% on fourth down, so that wasn't bad. But we had 19 touchdowns to 23 interceptions with 66 sacks. So just looking at that offense, 15 points a game. We take Abdul Carter, and people say, hey, we got to stop people. But how do you upgrade this offense that only scored 15 points a game last year if you use your most valuable pick on the defensive side? And then people say, oh, well, look at Philadelphia. The problem is people are only looking at what Philadelphia did in the Super Bowl. They're not looking at their full body of work over the course of the season. I kind of spoke on it earlier. What did Philadelphia do? Philadelphia, they drafted Jalen Hurts while they still had Carson Wentz. They signed Saquon Barkley last year. They traded for A.J. Brown, and they re-signed him. They drafted Devontae Smith. They drafted a D lineman from Georgia 3 years ago. Then the next year, they got another D lineman who ended up dropping because of off-field things, and that's how they build their team. They also got Montez Sweat, who was balling in the Super Bowl. So when people are saying, look what they did, people are totally disregarding what they did on offense. The entire year, they were a ball control team, and that's obvious based on how many yards that Saquon ran for in the year. And also Jalen Hurts and his rushing. Jalen Hurts also was the MVP of the Super Bowl. So when people want to say, oh man, get Abdul Carter because look at what Philly did. Look at everything that Philly did. Philly secured their offense first. Saquon Barkley was the cherry on top. And then they were able to utilize that to take advantage of what their defense was able to do. They didn't build that defense. They didn't win all these games since Jalen Hurts been there, or since Jalen Hurts been a starter, from holding people to 10 points a game. That is not what happened. People cannot rewrite history on what happened. So just wanted to clear it up. So now, most valuable pick we have, offense only scored 15 points a game, gave up 25. You take Abdul Carter, which isn't your highest need, even if it's on defense. I would say edge is not our highest need. We probably have some issues in linebacker. I would like to see us get another safety. You're probably you're not taking a linebacker or a safety at number 2 overall. That's just flat out. That is what it is. So that eliminates it there. So then edge, why would we be taking edge there? So if you just go through that little mind game that we just played there, you can see how Abdul Carter is kind of off the table for us. You can see how Travis Hunter is most likely off the table for us because we're getting that highest level, number 1 receiver, or potentially a second or third cornerback that is more comfortable playing outside because that's what he always played. Or you're getting a quarterback who potentially, even I think his ceiling could be higher than Kirk Cousins, but even if his ceiling is Kirk Cousins, we're going to be putting up way more points, and that's going to give us a chance. So, just kind of doing that mind melt, like, asking that next level question. A lot of people, when they look at situations, they look at it so surface level, or they look at it like with the draft, just doing things the safest way possible. But the problem is, everybody thought that Jalen Hurts wasn't worth it when they took him in the second round. Everybody thought Lamar Jackson was going to be a wide receiver. They didn't know why Baltimore traded up, why they still had a younger Joe Flacco. But you got to take these risks. There's all risk versus reward. Just doing things the safest way possible. If that's the case, we should do like who's the coach? Eric Mangini did, and we trade out of the pick for Julio Jones, and then we take Alex Mack, who was good for a couple of years, but then we are stuck in the cycle of looking for a receiver to pair on our offense when Julio Jones was right there. If you look at this Deshaun Watson situation, one thing that a lot of people never bring up, which is kind of weird to me or odd, I would say, we had the opportunity to draft Deshaun Watson when he came out. We didn't draft him, and then we trade for him years later when he costs way more. What happens if you took that risk the first time? So, just looking at that, kind of a little rant there, but just showing that, you never get the big reward without taking a big risk. And I would say if you just looked at it like that, based on upside, based on importance of having a quarterback that you believe in and you trust, you take him at number 2. Also, let me say these last couple of things before we get to the fourth quarter in the playoffs. I don't want to go too deep, or I don't want to be on too long into when the game starts. We got 15 minutes we got about 15 minutes for the Lakers and Minnesota. I want to watch the game. So everybody's saying take Jalen Milroe. Oh, Jalen Milroe is the lottery ticket. Jalen Milroe is the lottery ticket. And their reasoning is because of his speed. And if we get Travis Hunter and, he's a project, but, we got to work on his footwork, got to work on his touch on short to intermediate game. To me, we already tried to do the hot thing, what the NFL is kind of falling for, that's not really winning. And it didn't work with Deshaun. And the quarterback who doesn't read the pocket, he doesn't read the field as well because they have the athleticism, they usually have a harder time doing that year in and year out because they're just not ahead of the defense. And I want my quarterback to be better at reading the defense than they are running the 40. So just to wrap that up there. And I think the only reason why people are saying Jalen Milroe is because they believe that it's a safer pick at 2 to go Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter and then take a quarterback later. But if you just go back a couple weeks when I did the breakdown of Mel Kiper and he showed the success rate of the later that you draft a quarterback and your likelihood of that quarterback just leading you to be playoff eligible. The later and later you go, it's not there. The opportunity is not there. So that's my TED Talk on making hard decisions and going to that next level of asking the question. So